Hello, everyone. It is Friday, which means it's another Ask Me Anything webinar with experienced investigators. Today, we are going to be talking about something that is super important to run a customer experience program effectively, but you may or may not have one of these. It's called a CX charter. We're going to be talking about ways to build your own, the questions to ask, and why it's so important. And as always, today we have David Hornreich, our Director of Marketing here. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. I'm joining you today from the East Coast.
Whoa,
I
what?
know.
That's crazy.
I'm in Pittsburgh, PA, visiting the in-laws,
Nice.
hence the fancy new backdrop. And it's nice. It's nice
Yeah.
to change pace. It's nice to travel again.
It's a new phenomenon here, right? I just traveled for the first time last week and planes are packed and airports are packed. Everything's kind of people are going places for sure. So,
Mhm.
well, that's good. Well, good to have you in a different location thanks to the wonders of technology.
Incredible.
And I think we should just jump in today. But as we go through this, don't forget this is an Ask Me Anything webinar. So, what should they do, David?
They should ask you anything. Specifically, throw a question in the chat. We're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn Live, so wherever you are, put your question in the chat, and we will do our best to get to it after this part is over.
Excellent. Good. Well, hey, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeannie Walters, and I am the founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. And our mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And we do this through consulting and coaching, as well as speaking and workshops and training and all of those things. So, our passion is about making sure that you, as customer experience leaders, have what you need to move forward and to make actual progress on your customer experience goals so that you can deliver better experiences for your customers. One of the ways we're doing that this year, which you may have heard of, is Year of CX. This is the program that we created to really give you these tools throughout the year. So we have a brand new tool for you. It's a CX charter guidebook based on this topic. So if you haven't already signed up for Year of CX, go ahead and do that. If you want that guidebook, there's a link right there. And if you use these tools, if you have questions about these tools, if you are moving forward with your own program, we want to hear about that. So go ahead and use Year of CX as a hashtag and let us know what you're doing, how you're using these tools. And better yet, we want this community to be about you joining us as an experienced investigator. Now, when we talk about being an experienced investigator, of course, that's our brand, but we also believe that everybody who attends things like this, you're already doing it. You are exploring what matters most to your customers and you're acting on it. So tell us in social media, use that hashtag, I am an experienced investigator, because, and tell us why. Tag me if you'd like, wherever you are on Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere really. And let us know with that hashtag what you're doing because we want to celebrate you. We want to make sure that you are getting the recognition you deserve in building, a better customer experience and helping us live that mission to create fewer ruined days for customers. So having said all that, let's jump into the topic today. That is about a CX charter. And when we talk about this, first of all, let's describe what this is. A customer experience charter is essentially a brief document. It's something that will outline what the roles and responsibilities are, what the goals are, what the CX governing team really needs to know. Because a lot of times customer experience is talked about, but not necessarily acted on in the way that it should be as a business strategy, as a business discipline, as a way to make progress on your overall organizational goals. So, the idea of a CX charter is to help you achieve those real outcomes and really to help build that cross functional leadership that we need in order to turn ideas into action and into actual business outcomes. So, we'll walk through today some of the questions to ask as you build this and also how to use this moving forward. When we talk about governance in customer experience, we're really talking about what are the rules here? What did we all agree to? What are the commitments? And how will that help us prioritize and move things that we need to move through our organization? So let's go ahead and talk about the team first, because you can write your own charter, you can have a charter document, but if it's just you, that maybe won't do as much as something that you have that team to back it up. You absolutely need a cross-functional leadership team. Sometimes this is called a customer experience strategic council. Sometimes this is called the CX governance team. Sometimes it's just called the customer experience leadership team. Whatever you call it in your organization, make sure that you understand who some of those key players have to be. And the key players really will have two levels of accountability. Often there is a team that decides, okay, this is what we are suggesting. These are the priorities we think we should move forward based on our customer experience goals. And then there are those who need to approve that, sponsor those efforts, hold other leaders accountable. Sometimes that's in two layers, sometimes that's all together. But you do need leaders who can have some direct accountability over the actions that we are talking about in order to improve that customer journey. So once you have that customer experience leadership team, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And one of the best ways to do that is to develop a CX charter. Now, some of this language might be familiar to those of you who have a background in project management. Project managers really made this idea of a project charter something that became popular in business. That's because it was a way to define, what are we all doing here? What are our goals? What are our commitments to one another as well? So when you think about your own customer experience charter, here are 6 questions we're going to walk through today, because these are what you really need to have front and center when you're walking through and developing your own charter. The first one is, what is your CX vision? So this includes things we talk about a lot, the mission statement, all of those things that we have examined in webinars like this in the past. We also are going to talk about goals and objectives. This ties back to something we have also talked about, the success statement. How are you really defining success for customer experience in your organization? What are the roles and responsibilities of the team members? We want to make sure we understand, what are we committing to when we are part of this team? How do we prioritize CX efforts? This is a big, huge, giant question. This is where a lot of things fall down, because sometimes it's really easy to identify a long list of improvements we want to make. We have to make sure that we have a system, a way to govern those choices so that we can prioritize in an effective way. And who needs to know what we're doing here? Who needs to approve? Where do we need buy-in? All of those things. We need to think about, how will we communicate both in and out of our team? How will we make sure that the people who are part of this, maybe tangentially, that they get the right information? How do we make sure leaders hear about what we're doing? All of those things. And then finally, how will this team work together? What are the logistics? What are the commitments we're making? How often do we meet? All of those simple things that if you don't talk about and document up front, they can lead to disappointment later. So in a way, we are applying customer experience best practices to the customer experience team. This is all about defining expectations, understanding our goals, and then taking the right actions to support those goals and live up to those expectations. So let's jump in. The first one, what is our CX vision? You have all heard me say this before. It's so important. We have to know where we're going. We have to have that aspirational vision of what we want for our customers and for the experience that we deliver. And we have to marry that with what we see for our organization. So we have 2 tools that we provided that you can use to help you get here. But one, of course, is the CX mission statement. That's where you really define, what is it you're trying to do? What is it that the customer experience really means to your customers and to your organization? You need this to be something that is brief, that you can internalize, that everybody in the organization really understands. This is what we're trying to do with customer experience. And then you also want that customer experience success statement. And that's where you define those goals. That's where you really get into, how are we measuring success? And that goes right into the next question here about, what are our CX goals and objectives? So if you have these 2 foundational tools, the CX mission statement and the CX success statement, then certain teams might create their own goals. They might want to make sure that they have very specific CX goals. We encourage you to use our SMIRC framework, which is social, measurable, inspirational, relevant, and contextual. That is how you make sure that your goals are going to be specific enough to measure and really tied in to those overall goals and to the leadership goals that you have as well. So, when you're looking at what are our CX goals and objectives for your CX charter, you really want to keep it kind of high level. You want to make sure that you're focused on those organizational goals, but the SMIRC goals can help these individual leaders really tie that back to the work they're doing to develop their own goals as well. Now, what are our roles and responsibilities? Anybody who's worked on a group project in school has understood what it feels like to be the one person who's actually doing the work, or somebody who is thinking, well, they'll do the work so I don't have to. If we don't define the roles and responsibilities of the team members, who is doing what, how will we actually make sure that things are getting done? What is my responsibility versus your responsibility? If we don't define that from the beginning, it can feel like one of those group projects in school where maybe the leader, the person who really wanted to make this happen, they end up doing way too much work. Or maybe they're delegating so much that people are looking at them and thinking, well, this isn't so much fun because I thought we were all equal players here. So make sure you're really defining what are the roles and responsibilities. We have to make sure that this isn't just an idea generating committee. This is about taking those insights and the feedback that we get from customers, as well as the goals that we're going for, and really formulating a plan of action to make sure that we can move the needle, we can make the progress that we want to make. So it's a constantly evolving situation because we're constantly, hopefully, getting feedback from our customers, gaining insights from that feedback, as well as looking to the future, looking at innovation, looking at changing expectations. But if we don't define how we will actually take those steps, how we will take those insights and turn them into something, then it can be very easy for this to become kind of just a talking session instead of an action session. We want to make sure that everybody understands their real responsibilities and that everybody understands each other's roles as well. So, one thing to note here is that sometimes we need to bring people in on a short term basis. There might be a specific project that requires expertise that we don't have on the team. We may want to bring somebody in to the team for a short or a time bound, I should say, a time bound situation. And if that's the case, a charter like this, something that defines different roles, you can add to it for that one person or for that one team player. But by having the charter document, you can pull people in like that and say, this is who we are. These are our commitments. These are the roles. This is what you can expect as you partner with us for this one specific thing. So charters can really help you not only as the core team, but as you work with different teams or different players to get certain things done, it can really help you hit the ground running with those people instead of trying to just kind of get them involved by osmosis. The charter is a document that can help you make sure that you're taking the right steps with the right people. And then how do we prioritize? This is the big question. A lot of times what happens is we do something big, right? We do a customer journey map, we have service blueprinting sessions, all of those different things, and we come out with a list of incredible ideas. We want to improve the customer journey end to end. We have all these great ideas about technology, about people, about communication, about training, all of these different areas that impact the customer experience. But if we're all coming at that from kind of our CRM system, that's going to improve everything. And somebody else from the digital marketing team might say, wait, we know we can do a better job on the digital experience for our customers. That's where we should invest. If we're all coming at it from that perspective, there's a natural friction that happens. Leaders will then kind of fight for their piece of the pie. What we want to do with this charter is make sure we have a rubric of sorts. We have a way to define, okay, if we know our overall goals are this, then we will prioritize in this way. Sometimes there's still negotiation, right? You can say, well, if we invest in that backend system, then we invest in learning and development. That could really move the needle further right now than the digital experience. Even though we all thought the digital experience was where it's at. We want to make sure that we're having those conversations, but we want to make sure that we're all looking through the same lens on behalf of the customer. And that's where having something like a charter that is tied back to your goals, tied back to your vision, tied back to, what? We might not have the resources right now. That team is short staffed. We cannot invest right now because we know that we don't have enough momentum over there. Those types of discussions to help you prioritize so that there isn't this fight over the fiefdoms, right? The territories of, well, we want more, so we want, more investment over here for our team. That's what this can really help you with. So make sure you talk about how will success be measured, how will outcomes be rewarded, and what are the consequences of not achieving certain results? Because if we invest in one area and nothing really happens, what does that mean? We want leaders to feel accountable and empowered to really make those changes too. So this is where we really need to think about what are we prioritizing and why, and use that lens and that language as we prioritize as a team, which is an ongoing effort because every time you meet, you're going to have more insights, more feedback. You're going to be looking at a different landscape, especially right now. The world changes so fast that it's going to be easy to feel like you're changing all the time. You want to make sure that every time you come together, you have that vision together. You say, okay, we've got 10 more ideas. We're going to place those here in our priority list because it makes sense with our overall set of standards. This is really what governance is all about. This can also help you define things like when and how do we collect feedback from customers? How do we make sure that we're not over surveying them? All of those pieces kind of fit under this prioritization. Now, this is a big one too. Who needs to know what we're doing and who needs to approve? So, when we talk about leadership buy-in in customer experience, we talk a lot about communicating. How do we communicate in a way that gets leaders to really understand and get excited about what we're doing? Because we can talk a lot about customer experience being a priority, but if leaders are not willing to invest in it, it's not a priority. We have to earn that. We have to make sure that they understand how important this is, not just to our customers, but also to our organization. And so, as things are happening, as action is taking place and progress is being made, be sure you're thinking proactively before it actually happens about who needs to know this, how can we showcase this, how can we get the leaders involved who would really be excited about these results, and what are the successful outcomes, what are those quick wins, what are those longer term things that we're working on. Communicate with leaders across your organization because they need to be invested in this. They need to understand what's going on and see the effort that's going in, but ultimately the outcomes and the results that you're achieving because of those efforts. We also need to think about who needs to approve what we're doing. Like I mentioned in the beginning, sometimes this is kind of a two-layered approach where you have a team that's actually prioritizing, having these discussions, and then they say, this is what we recommend for our priorities. And then a C-suite leader needs to approve those. You might need to have a sponsor. Sometimes those sponsors sit on the actual council. Sometimes it's a two-step process. So look at your organization, think about what makes sense, but think proactively about how will you communicate both for approval and then to report back, to share the results of what's happening. That can be very, very important if you want to receive continued support for a customer experience team and initiatives like this. How will this team work together? This is the question we usually leave out. I'll be honest. We usually don't talk about this from the very beginning. We assume that everybody understands that, okay, we'll be here when we need to be, and we'll have these meetings, but we don't talk about what will happen between the meetings. What are our accountabilities? How will we communicate as a team? How often will we meet? What happens if one of us can't be there? Can we send a team member on our behalf, or do we have to reschedule for everybody? Think about those types of logistical questions in the beginning and make sure you have that in your document. It can help really remove a lot of misunderstandings, miscommunications, all those things that break down a functioning team. And so thinking about this in advance really helps everybody also understand their commitment to this. Because if they are thinking, oh, this is fun, I'm just going to meet once a month and hear about customer experience, and they don't really understand their responsibilities, they don't really think that it's something that is mandatory instead of optional. Those are the types of things that can cause a lot of friction and slow down the progress that you want to make, because this is all about progress. So if month after month you're meeting and not a lot is happening, good time to revisit. How is our charter? What did we actually commit to one another? Can we recommit to that and make sure that everybody is on board? So these are just 6 questions to get you going. Sometimes as you develop these things, it can feel very unwieldy. I encourage you, keep it brief. Look at it as, if you can, a one-page document or 2 pages, if maximum, but think about it as an exercise in brevity and in really setting the commitments moving forward so that you can make the progress that you want as a team. So these are the 6 questions to remember. What is our CX vision? What are our goals and objectives specifically around customer experience? What are our roles and responsibilities? How can we prioritize these efforts? Who needs to know what we're doing and who needs to approve? And how will this team work together? So as you move forward, sometimes you might think, okay, how do we get this team together? It's okay to take baby steps here. Start with a small team. You probably, if you're on this webinar today, if you are interacting with our resources, you are a customer experience change agent. You are somebody who gets what you're doing, who wants to make real change in your organization. I bet you know other people like you. I bet that you can look out and think, oh, that person on that team, they're all about this too. I've talked to them about this. Ask them, can you help me build this team? Look for those people who are already kind of getting it and invested. Start with a small team, draft a charter, do it on your own, and then get those other people involved, those other leaders, and say, hey, this is what we're proposing we want to do. Let's invite the right people. And that's when you look at, okay, who has accountability over what? Who can really make change where we need to make change? And how do we make sure the right people are on this team so that we can make the progress that we want and get the return on the investment in customer experience that a lot of people don't get because they're talking instead of taking action. This is all about action. So take those baby steps, do what you need to do, and then see if you can build that momentum and bring more people into this community of CX change agents like yourself. So with that, I would love to open it up to questions. So anybody have any questions, David?
Yeah, I want to say hi to Thais first.
Oh, hi.
Always nice to see you. She said hi in the chat. Let's start off with a question from email that came in. Should everyone in the organization see your CX charter, even if they're not directly involved in the CX team?
Yeah, great question. So I think some of this is based on kind of where your organization is on their customer experience maturity, how they are really adopting and adapting to CX throughout the organization. In the beginning, I would say it doesn't need to be seen by everybody. You do need to get that sponsorship or that approval from the leaders who can make a difference. So sometimes what happens is you have to be a little careful about doing this too broadly because everybody will have an opinion, right? This is about the team that's doing the work, that is approving and prioritizing and really making sure that the right efforts are being handled and governed in your CX program. So knowing that, then you might want to keep it a smaller team in the beginning. Once things get going and you have momentum, it's a great thing to share. I think the charter itself is really about the functioning of the team and the functioning of how the team is working and the governance around that. The more important pieces to share are the CX mission statement, the CX success statement, and communicating in that way about the vision that you have, the aspirations that you have for CX, and how you're measuring success. Those are more important to share broadly than the actual charter. The charter is more a document to help keep your team on track. So sometimes if you think about it from the origins of the project charter document that I talked about, a project manager will have that charter for every project they work on. This is specifically around CX. So it's a little bit of a nuanced decision, but I would say it's less important outside of the team and outside of the sponsorship. it's more important to share that CX mission statement and that CX success statement broadly. Good question.
Yeah, that's a good one. And so Anna in the chat asked if we could add the questions that were mentioned into the chat, which is a wonderful idea. I've thrown those in the chat in LinkedIn and in YouTube as well. And then all those questions with details and kind of suggestions on how to dig deeper are also not in the CX mission workbook. The CX Charter guidebook, which you can get at bit.ly/CX Charter. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, keep the questions coming. I'm going to go to one more that came in over the course of the week from email. And so that question is, what sort of hierarchy do you recommend for a cross-functional team? Maybe how do you avoid that classic school project problem?
Yeah, so it is helpful to have somebody who kind of owns the structure of the team and owns the accountability around the team. And I've seen this handled a few different ways. And so some of this depends on the culture of your organization. One is you can have a project manager who runs these meetings, who really is responsible for communicating between meetings and holding different people accountable and all of those things. That can be very, very effective because that can be almost like a third party stepping in and managing all the different leaders. Sometimes you do need that approver, that executive sponsor on the team. And so sometimes they take a natural leadership position and kind of can help you move through things. The key there is that they might be very important to say, this is how we're prioritizing, or kind of be the tiebreaker if you're deciding about those different efforts. But they might not be the right person to hold people accountable in between meetings to make sure that things are moving forward. So sometimes they need somebody to support them in that role too. And sometimes you do need that separation. So I've also seen this where the team is very much, kind of an equal playing field for everybody. And they might change and rotate about who's leading this month the meeting or this quarter or whatever it is. And so as they rotate leadership of the meeting, they still have to present those ideas, those recommendations to that higher level to get the approval from kind of the leadership team or the executive level. So it can be broken up a few different ways. I am a fan of having project managers involved because I think they really do help things move forward, and they can take a more practical, I guess, logical approach instead of sometimes leaders are very emotional about what they lead. And so by including a project manager, you can guide the efforts a little better. And so if you have a PMO, a project management office, if you're building this, it might be a great thing to see if you can get a resource from your PMO to help really guide the steps, the efforts, the accountability, the logistics, all of those things, because that can take some time and effort. So that's what I would recommend. I like having project managers on the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I didn't mention this after the first part was over, but I just want to call out, way to work the word fiefdom into this presentation.
Why not?
I think that all CX teams should be called CX fiefdoms from now on.
No, we can't.
No, we don't want that.
We have to break down the walls. We have to make sure we're all working together in the same kingdom or queendom or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it looks like that's going to do it for our questions for today. But Jeannie, where can people find you? How can people get involved?
Yeah. Well, we always love hearing from you, and we really do want to hear from you about, how are you an experienced investigator? So let us know that with that hashtag, I am an experienced investigator, because if you haven't yet signed up for Year of CX, we encourage you to do that. We got a lot coming up in these next few weeks. So hopefully you'll get a lot of value that way. And you can find me, you can email us. We are on Twitter, Instagram, of course, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of these different things. So feel free to reach out. Let us know what you want to hear about. What tools are you looking for? What do you want these webinars to cover? We love hearing directly from you. And that's what provides a lot of the guidance around what content we produce. So don't be shy about that as well. But happy Friday. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.